90% of the large predators have been removed by fishing in the last 50 years. And these include tuna, swordfish, marlin sharks. Some sharks that most of them are caught for their fins that are sent to the Asian market for shark fin soup, and then the bodies are discarded to the bottom where they die. 99% of the sharks in the Mediterranean are gone in the last 100 years too because of overfishing. In the last 50 years, 30% of the fisheries have collapsed, which means that they are not profitable anymore. The catch now is 10%, only 10% of the maximum historical catch for each one of these species. And if we project these trends, we reach bottom in 2048, which does not mean that these species will go extinct, as it was said on the video before, but all these fisheries will have collapsed, which means that they will not be profitable anymore. So all the fishing and economies and the social networks that are supported by these fisheries will also disappear. This is a satellite photo of trawlers for shrimp in Southeast Asia, in the South China Sea. Same thing is happening near here in the Gulf of Mexico. And by 2020, 90% of all the bottom shallower than 100 meters is going to be trawled at least once a year. And some places in the Gulf of Mexico or the North Sea are trawled 20 times a year. Imagine plowing a field 20 times a year. What kind of yield could you get from that? And as was shown in the video, removing all these animals that make the ecosystem healthy, all these animals that filter the water and keep it clean, results in the explosion of all these toxic algal blooms. This is an example of a red algal bloom in the late 90s in Florida, and it caused a major increase in asthma and other respiratory diseases on the coast because people were simply breathing on the beach. It's a very, very complex ecosystem, but there are solutions. There are things that we know work and can be done today. And a great example is the marine protected areas, especially these areas where all fishing is prohibited, to allow for the recovery of marine life in their boundaries and for the replenishment of marine life around these marine protected areas. This is an example of the Mediterranean where all that is left is sea urchins and bare rock, and after a few years of protection, the fishes come back. Lots of fish. After a few years, most of these reserves have so many fishes inside, they reproduce so much that there is spillover. And these reserves are like savings accounts. So these are 6 major solutions that can be implemented today. There are too many boats out there. The World Bank released a study last year showing that we are losing $50 billion because of the mismanagement and inefficiency of fisheries. So if we took half of the boats out of the water, the remaining half would be catching the same amount of fish. Every year we are throwing $35 billion to subsidies to the most destructive fisheries. These fisheries would not be profitable without taxpayer support, and these subsidies need to be eliminated. A smart or clean aquaculture, that's part of the future. Right now, most of the aquaculture is based on fish meal produced from fishes that we are catching from the sea. This doesn't make sense. This is like killing cows to feed lions and throwing away 4 times the amount of seafood that we could actually consume ourselves. We need, as Sylvia said yesterday, to develop this global network of marine reserves. These are the savings accounts that we need, and they can provide economic alternatives for fishermen and other people who depend on ocean resources in these degraded areas. This network of reserves and these solutions are like building a savings account. So we have 2 alternatives. One is do what we are doing now, which is to withdraw from a debit account where we never make any deposit, or build a savings account and live off the interest. Thank you.
Some very astounding figures and facts up there. 90% of seafood, 90% of fish have been taken out of the ocean. Make no mistake, 90% of we ate them. This is not just some miracle or some mystery. Like, they didn't just disappear. I mean, we've eaten them, and I get blamed sometimes for being the one to make them so delicious. But the bottom line is, why do we eat them? Well, we ate them because they're dinner. And dinner is a very essential and central part of our existence. You know, it's a lot of the work that I'm doing is really trying to guide people back to a sustainable and responsible relationship with our oceans, with our resources, by the fact that it's not about the tragedy of the commons, but rather about the communion of the commons. Food and the environment are two of the only things that we actually share in common in this world. Everyone in this world shares those two things, and it's a remarkable way to draw people together. You know, there's a lot of talk out there about these ideas of sustainable seafood. If you look at those numbers up there, are we supposed to pat ourselves on the back for sustaining less than 10% of our biomass? You know, not very wise. Obviously, sustainable, able to be sustained, means, yes, let's not get to 9%, please. That makes sense. But ultimately, we should be investing and eating restorative seafood. Things like farm-raised oysters out of the Chesapeake Bay, farm-raised catfish and tilapia from this country. These are delicious, environmentally friendly options that are human-friendly, too. Not only are sustainable fisheries about the ocean, sustainable fisheries are about people. Sustainability is all about people. It's our actions that have caused these problems. And if you look at the very sort of the nomenclature that we use, we talk about fish an awful lot. But a fish has value as a living, breathing, contributing member of an ecosystem. And the work of, you know, really our world's heroes like Sylvia and her work to explore and expose our benthic worlds to us. You know, most of us don't have that opportunity. Groups like National Geographic are bringing this to life for people and exposing people to the majesty of our world that we ultimately consume. By changing the lexicon, by changing the nomenclature to be a little bit more about our reality, which is seafood, a fish, living, breathing member of an ecosystem, meets a person. A, it dies. B, it becomes seafood. So if we begin to talk to people in the terms that they understand, in the ways that they get, I think we begin to create a larger understanding of this. And, you know, you're telling me that I can help save the world by eating as many farm-raised oysters as I can? Like, hell yeah, count me in. You know, I mean, there's some really great options. I mean, I've got farm-raised Alabama catfish on my menu right now, #1 seller. We're serving it with a coriander-infused yogurt sauce with a little bit of lemon juice in it, deep-fried, crispy, crunchy with a corn and mint salsa on top of it. Like, oh, wow, cool. You know, this is good stuff. This is sustainability in action. In fact, this is restorative seafood in action. You know, that I like to, you know, the whole idea of sustainability being a human behavioral issue. There's this really great story out there. There's this guy, Jesus, in the Bible, in this story called Loaves and Fishes. And there's this great idea that Jesus was standing on the seashore and, you know, the masses thronged to him to hear his words. And they were all hungry. And he had 3 fish and 5 loaves of bread. And from that, he was able to feed the masses. And while that's a parable for modern day, what we're trying to do right now is trying to find more fish to feed more people. And it's not working. Technology is failing us while it succeeds. It is failing us ultimately. The replicable miracle of that day, of that story that we can all practice starting, well, at lunch today, is that all the people present took only what they needed, and then they shared the rest. Wow. Well, isn't that pretty amazing? And if we start there, and if we start with oysters, and if we reduce our portion sizes, you know, before, you know, we have marine protected areas and all this stuff, I mean, this takes months of policy, years of policy, and the will of the people. Bottom line is, you and your individual families and your homes and restaurants can start by reducing portion size. You know, that's a great way to start saving the world. You want to save the oceans? Eat some broccoli. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. If we change the topography of our plates, if we change the overbearing nature of our consumptive culture, you know, that really the ultimate, to me, the compelling narrative of conservation is really about consumption. We interact with our resources really by eating them. And a more conscientious approach to that befits all of us. You know, that Sylvia was saying that we, last night in the video, that we rely on the oceans for our own survival. And overfishing is really a crime against ourselves.